I hadn't seen another soul in nearly a month when it happened. Out there in the hills, that's the way I liked it. Silence was the only company that never betrayed a man. I had the creek for water, a half-rotted cabin to sleep in, and enough firewood to last through the winter. Most folks would call it lonely. To me, it was peace. But peace doesn't last in this world. Not for men like me. The night had settled heavy, the kind of stillness that makes a man's bones ache. I was sitting at the table, oiling the shotgun I'd carried since the war, when I heard it. Not the cry of a coyote or the scrape of tree branches. No, this was different. Stumbling, desperate footsteps across the gravel just outside my door. Before I could rise, something slammed against the porch. Not a knock. A collapse. I pushed open the door and there she was. Barefoot, skin torn and caked with dirt, wrapped in something that might have once been a dress but now looked more like a rag pulled off a line. Her eyes were wide, but not with fear. More like the look of someone who'd already lived through hell and wasn't sure if she'd made it out. She tried to speak, but only 2 words slipped out, rasped like broken glass. Please, don't. Then she crumpled at my feet. For a long second, I just stood there. I'd seen bodies drop before, plenty of them, but this wasn't the battlefield. This was my porch, my quiet corner of the world where the past was supposed to stay buried. I could have turned away. God knows it would have been easier. But something in the way her fingers clutched the wood, holding on like she was still fighting even as she collapsed. I couldn't leave her there. Not in the dirt. I lifted her up, lighter than I expected, and carried her inside. Her skin was cold, clammy, trembling against me like she'd just crawled out of a snowstorm. But it wasn't frost that had done this. It was people. I could tell. When I laid her on the cot, the rag she wore shifted just enough for me to see her back. I wished I hadn't. Scars. Burn marks. Letters carved into flesh like a man branding his cattle. Symbols that didn't belong on human skin, cruel signatures of ownership. For a moment, the room spun. I saw Tennessee again, the girl I couldn't save, the flames, the smoke, the silence that came after. I gripped the edge of the cot so hard my knuckles cracked, because I knew if I didn't, I'd lose myself right there. She stirred, just barely. Tried to pull the rag tighter across her shoulders, but even in her weakness, she curled into herself like a beaten animal trying to disappear. I took off my coat, dusty, worn, older than some trees out back, and draped it over her. She flinched, then stilled. For the first time since I'd seen her, the fight drained from her muscles. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. Questions could wait until she trusted me enough to answer. For now, I built up the fire in the stove, let the crackle of wood fill the silence. The flames gave the cabin a heartbeat it hadn't had in years. I sat at the table, shotgun resting across my lap, and watched her breathe. That was the night everything changed. She didn't wake until dawn. I'd stayed up, listening to the coyotes in the distance, the wind sliding between the shutters, every creak of the floorboards. When her eyes finally opened, they darted around the room like she was still expecting chains. Her lips parted, dry and cracked, and she whispered one word. Water. I handed her a tin cup slow, careful, like a man approaching a wild horse. She took it, both hands shaking, and drank. Not fast, not greedy, just steady. When she finished, she looked at me for the first time. Not at my hands, not at the fire, at me. And in that look, I saw a single thing that made me put my guard down. She was still here. Alive. I didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but I knew enough. Somebody out there had carved hell into her skin and sent her running for her life. And whether I liked it or not, I was now the wall standing between her and whatever devil was chasing her. I should have felt dread. Should have pushed her back out into the wild and told myself it wasn't my fight. But instead, sitting there in the dim light of morning, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Alive. That was the beginning. But beginnings lie. They make you believe the worst has already passed. Truth is, that night on my porch wasn't an ending. It wasn't even a rescue. It was just the spark before the fire. And the fire was coming. The morning stretched long and silent after she asked for that water. I sat there watching the steam curl up from the coffee pot on the stove, trying not to stare at her too much, but it was hard. She looked like a ghost someone forgot to bury. Skin pale beneath the dirt, eyes sunk deep like she hadn't slept in weeks. Yet there was something in the way she held that tin cup. Careful, steady. Like it was the first thing in a long time that hadn't been stolen from her. I knew better than to push her. Questions can break a person quicker than hunger. So I let the silence fill the room, just the crackle of the fire and the low whistle of wind slipping through the cracks in the wall. She didn't speak much that first day. Just small things. More water. A nod when I handed her some dried bread. A glance at the window every time a branch scraped against the glass. By nightfall, she still hadn't told me her name. But she didn't need to. Her body told me enough. The way she flinched at sudden noises. The scars that ran like twisted rivers down her back. The way her shoulders curved inward, like she was trying to fold herself into nothing. I'd seen men come back from war with that same look. And I knew it meant one thing. Whatever had been done to her, it wasn't over in her head. Not by a long shot. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with my shotgun across my knees, eyes on the door. I told myself it was habit, just an old soldier's instinct. But the truth was, I could feel something out there. Something that hadn't let her go yet. The second day, she started to talk. Not much. Just fragments. They made me clean their boots. It came out quiet, like she hadn't meant to say it at all. She was sitting on the steps, the morning sun cutting through the pines, her bare feet pale against the wood. I didn't answer. Didn't look at her. I just kept working at the chair leg I'd been whittling, slow and steady. Sometimes silence is the only way to let someone keep talking. There's a camp, she said after a while. Not on maps. Not supposed to exist. They bring people there. Work them until there's nothing left. My knife scraped against the wood. The sound was sharp in the quiet. I ran once. They broke my nose. She touched her face, as if to remind herself it was still there. Ran again. They carved me up. She pulled the collar of my coat lower, just enough for the sunlight to catch on the raw scars across her shoulder. I gripped the knife tighter. Not because I wanted to ask, but because I wanted to kill something. She didn't tell me how she made it out the third time. Didn't need to. The fact she was sitting there breathing was answer enough. Later that afternoon, I heard it. Hooves. At first, I thought it was just a rancher passing through. But the sound was wrong. Too fast, too deliberate. The kind of rhythm that doesn't belong to a man with work to do. I stood, set down the knife, and grabbed my shotgun. She froze like a rabbit caught in the open. I didn't even have to tell her. She slipped back inside the cabin, quiet as smoke. The rider came up the ridge road a few minutes later. He wasn't what I expected. Not a cowboy, not a bandit. No, this man looked like he belonged behind a desk, not a saddle. Fancy vest, slicked hair, mustache curled just enough to hide the cruelty underneath. His horse stopped at the edge of the porch, and he leaned forward with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ellie Rose," he called, voice oily, too sure of itself. "You got one chance to come back quiet. Ellie." That was the first time I heard her name. I stepped off the porch, shotgun loose in my hands. "She's not going anywhere." He tilted his head, studying me like I was a stray dog that had wandered into his yard. "Ain't up to you, old man." I cocked the shotgun. Not aimed, just enough to let the sound hang heavy in the air. Out here, that click carries more weight than any words. For a moment, the man's smile wavered. He spat into the dirt, pulled at the reins, and turned his horse. But before he rode off, he gave me a look. A long, slow look that said more than any threat could. This wasn't over. That night, Ellie didn't sleep. Neither did I. She sat by the fire, knees pulled up to her chest, staring at the flames like they might swallow her whole. Every creak of the cabin made her flinch. I sat at the table, shotgun across my lap, cleaning it even though it didn't need cleaning. My hands needed something to do besides shaking with the kind of rage I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know much about that camp yet. But I knew this. Men who carve their names into another's skin don't give up easy. The next morning, I found myself scribbling a note. Ink shaky from lack of sleep, words simple and sharp. A name, an old friend. Abram Hale. He used to ride with me in the war. Now he carried a badge. If anyone could help me hold this line, it was him. I sent the note down with a trapper I trusted, told him it was worth more than gold that it reached the right hands. When I came back, Ellie was standing by the window, looking out at the trees. For the first time since she'd arrived, the coat had slipped off her shoulders. And I could see the faintest hint of something I hadn't seen before. Not fear. Not despair. Hope. But hope is dangerous. Hope makes you believe the storm won't come crashing down. 3 days passed. Quiet days. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where even the birds hold their breath. I stayed close. Didn't cut wood, didn't check traps. Just kept the shotgun near, waiting. Because I knew the look that bankerman left me with. He was coming back. And next time, he wouldn't be alone. The quiet broke on the 4th day. I'd been outside splitting wood, not because we needed it, but because my hands couldn't stand still anymore. Ellie was inside, curled by the fire with one of my old blankets around her shoulders. I'd been listening to the silence for hours, the kind that presses on your ears until you swear you can hear your own blood moving. Then I heard it. Hooves. More than one this time. Slow at first, then steady, then close. I dropped the axe and reached for the shotgun leaning against the porch rail. My gut told me this was it. The storm had come. By the time I stepped off the porch, dust was rising on the ridge road. 3 riders. They weren't ranchers, weren't lawmen. No, these men rode like they owned whatever ground their horses touched. The first was the bankerman, the same greasy smile curling his mustache. He raised a hand like we were old friends meeting for supper. "Morning," he called. "We come for what's ours." Behind him, the other 2 shifted in their saddles. One had a scar running from ear to chin. The other's eyes were empty, cold like river stones. Guns on their hips, hands too close to the grips. Ellie stepped to the doorway, her face pale as ash. I didn't turn, didn't look at her, just raised a hand behind me. "Inside," I said low. "Now." She froze, then slipped back into the shadows. I leveled the shotgun, not aiming yet. Just letting them see I wasn't bluffing. "You rode all this way to make a mistake," I said. The banker chuckled, like he'd heard the joke before. "Old man, you don't know what you're holding onto. She don't belong to you. She belongs to the camp." The way he said it, like she was a mule that had strayed from its pen, lit something hot in my chest. My hands went steady as stone. "She belongs to herself," I said. "And she ain't going back." The scar-faced rider leaned forward in his saddle. "Then you're a dead man." That was all the warning I got. His hand flashed, gun clearing leather. But I'd lived through too many wars to wait on another man's mercy. The shotgun roared, buckshot tearing into his leg. He screamed, toppled off his horse like a sack of feed, blood pouring into the dirt. The banker's smile vanished. The third rider's hand twitched toward his belt, but I was already racking the shotgun for another round. And that's when the voice cut through. "I'd think real hard about your next move." From the tree lean, a figure stepped out. Tall, broad, rifle slung low. Badge glinting in the sunlight. Abram Hale. He hadn't changed much since the war. Same hard jaw, same steady eyes. He looked at those men like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. "This here's my jurisdiction," Abram said. "And she's under my protection now." The banker sneered, but his eyes flicked to the badge. He knew what that meant. Out here, a sheriff wasn't just law, He was the rope, the gallows, and the dirt you got buried in if you crossed him. You'll regret this, the banker hissed. But his voice had lost its shine. He yanked the reins, turned his horse, and rode off. The wounded man groaned in the dirt until his partner hauled him up. Then they disappeared back down the ridge road, leaving a trail of blood behind them. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire. I lowered the shotgun, shoulders stiff. Abram stepped closer, looking me over like he was reading the years written on my face. You send a note that smells like gunpowder and regret, he said with a half smile. I figured it was serious. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe. That night, the cabin felt different. Not safer. No, men like that don't give up easy, but less alone. Abram sat at the table, cleaning his rifle, the firelight catching on the silver of his badge. Ellie stayed close to the hearth, her eyes darting between us like she wasn't sure which of us to fear less. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her voice carried a weight that made the room still. They'll come again, she whispered. Abram nodded. I know. But next time, they won't find us waiting blind. I watched her fingers tighten on the blanket, knuckles white. I wanted to tell her she was safe now, but I couldn't. Not with the taste of gunpowder still in my mouth and the sound of hoofbeats echoing in my ears. The days that followed were long. Abram stayed close, riding the ridge lines, watching for movement. I kept busy reinforcing the cabin, setting traps along the paths, stockpiling wood and water. Every creak of the forest put my nerves on edge. Ellie moved like a shadow those days. She ate when we offered food, drank when we handed her water, but rarely spoke. Still, I saw changes. Small ones. The way she no longer curled into herself by the fire, but sat straighter, shoulders back. The way she once lingered at the window, eyes following Abram as he saddled his horse. The way her hands, though scarred and trembling, began to help gather kindling without being asked. Little things. But little things mean something when you've been broken. On the 6th night, the storm hit. It wasn't rain or thunder, it was hoofbeats. Dozens of them, rolling through the valley like distant thunder. Abram burst through the door, rifle already in his hands. His face was grim. They're coming. More this time. Ellie froze, her lips parting but no sound coming out. I grabbed the shotgun, checked the shells. My hands were steady, my heart not. I looked at her, standing there in the firelight with fear carved deep into her eyes, and I made a decision. This is our fight now, I said. And as the hoofbeats drew closer, rattling the walls of the cabin, I knew there was no turning back. The night air turned heavy, thick with dust before the riders even came into sight. I could feel them long before I heard them, the earth trembling beneath their horses, the echo of something too large to be stopped. Abram stood at the window, eyes narrowed, rifle barrel resting against the sill. I sat by the door, shotgun across my knees, my pulse calm in a way that only comes to men who've already accepted death once before. Ellie was by the hearth. Her hands trembled around the edge of the blanket she'd pulled tight across her chest, but her eyes were alive. Wide, alert, not the hollow windows I'd first seen when she stumbled to my door. She knew this moment was coming. She'd run from it, bled from it, but tonight it had caught up. The first torchlight appeared between the pines. Then another. Then 10 more. Shadows stretched long and sharp across the clearing. Voices carried, low, cruel, full of the kind of confidence men wear when they think they own the night. Abram shifted his stance. At least a dozen, he muttered. Maybe more. These ain't hired hands. They're camp men. The worst kind. I racked the shotgun. The sound cut through the room, heavy and final. Ellie flinched, but didn't look away. They'll try the front first, I said. They always do. Thinking we'll scare easy. Abram gave a tight nod. Then we make sure they don't. The first shot shattered the silence. A pistol cracked from the tree lean, the bullet burying itself in the cabin wall. Wood splintered inches from Ellie's shoulder. She gasped, but didn't scream. I yanked her back from the firelight, my coat falling from her shoulders as I pressed her against the wall. "Stay low," I told her. "Stay quiet." The second shot came, then the third. The cabin shook with the sound of gunfire. Abram answered back, his rifle barking thunder, and one of the torchlights dropped into the dirt, snuffed out like a dying star. Shouts erupted outside. Horses reared. Men cursed. And then they charged. The door rattled as fists and boots slammed against it. I leveled the shotgun, waiting for the wood to split. Abram's rifle cracked again, the muzzle flash lighting his face like lightning. Another man screamed. The door burst open. The first one through didn't even see me. He came barreling in, eyes wild, pistol raised. I fired. The blast tore him back out onto the porch, his body slamming against the railing before crumpling into the dirt. The second was quicker. He ducked inside, blade flashing in his hand. Abram swung his rifle like a club, the stock cracking against the man's jaw. He collapsed in a heap, blood pooling fast beneath him. Ellie covered her ears, rocking against the wall, but her eyes never closed. She was watching it all, every scream, every shot. I didn't know if that was strength, or if she just didn't know how to shut her eyes anymore. The fight dragged on like a storm that wouldn't break. They kept coming, shadows pouring through the doorway, shots slamming into the walls, splinters raining across the floor. We fired back, over and over, each shot buying us seconds, each second a lifetime. At one point, a torch came sailing through the window, flames licking at the curtains. Ellie cried out, scrambling back as fire spread across the wall. I dropped the shotgun, grabbed the torch, and hurled it back outside. Abram covered me, his rifle barking at anything that moved in the clearing. The fire died, but the smoke lingered, choking the air. My lungs burned, my ears rang, my arms ached from reloading, firing, reloading again. But we held. One by one, the shouts grew fainter. The hoofbeats retreated. The torchlight scattered into the night. And just like that, the storm passed. Silence returned, but it wasn't peace. The cabin was a ruin of splintered wood and bloodstains. My shoulder throbbed where a bullet had grazed me, hot blood seeping down my sleeve. Abram leaned heavy against the table, his chest heaving, rifle barrel smoking. Ellie was still in the corner, knees drawn up, staring at the door like she expected it to burst open again. Her face was streaked with soot, her lips pale, but her eyes burned bright in the firelight. I knelt beside her, resting the shotgun against the floor. "It's over," I said. She shook her head. "No. They'll come again. They always come again." Abram's voice was low, steady. "She's right. That was just a taste. They'll regroup, come back stronger. Men like that don't forgive a beating." I looked at him, at the badge glinting dull against his chest. "So what now?" He met my gaze, and in that look, I saw the same truth I'd been carrying since the moment she collapsed on my porch. There was no turning back. "We take the fight to them," Abram said. The next day, the sun rose over a battlefield. The clearing outside the cabin was littered with blood and bodies. I buried them one by one, sweat stinging my eyes, dirt caked beneath my nails. Abram helped, silent, methodical. Ellie stood at the window, watching, her face unreadable. When the last grave was filled, I leaned on the shovel, my back screaming, my hands raw. Abram lit a cigarette, the smoke curling into the morning air. "They'll know now," he said. "Word'll spread fast. You killed their men. That banker ain't gonna let it rest. He'll bring the whole damn camp if he has to." I spat into the dirt. "Then we'll be ready." Ellie stepped outside then, the first time since the fight. She walked slow, bare feet sinking into the soil, until she stood by one of the graves. Her eyes lingered on the mound of fresh dirt, her jaw trembling. "They used to make me bury them too," she whispered. "The ones who didn't survive." Her voice broke, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She just straightened, lifted her chin, and looked at me. "I don't want to run anymore." For the first time, I saw not just a broken woman, but a survivor. Someone who'd crawled out of hell and was ready to fight to make sure she never went back. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. She wasn't just under my protection. She was my reason. That night, Abram spread a map across the table. It was old, worn, edges curling. He jabbed a finger at a spot between the hills. Here. That's where they're keeping the camp. Not on paper, not official. But I've heard whispers for years. Mining, labor, punishment. Folks vanish, and they vanish into that place. Ellie stood beside him, her hand hovering over the map but never touching it. Her voice was quiet, but sharp. It's worse than mining. They take people apart. Piece by piece. Until you forget who you are. The room went still. Abram looked at me, then back at her. You've been inside. She nodded once, and in that nod was every scar, every night she'd spent chained, every scream she'd swallowed. Abram's jaw tightened. Then you know what we're walking into. Ellie met his gaze, then mine. Yes. And I know the way. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat by the fire, watching the flames dance, listening to Ellie's breathing slow as she drifted into uneasy rest. Abram was outside, pacing the perimeter, boots crunching against the dirt. I thought about the years I'd wasted hiding in these hills, letting the world rot without me. Thought about the faces I couldn't save, the lives I'd turned my back on. And then I thought about her. About the way she'd stood by that grave with her chin high, refusing to bend anymore. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was suicide. But for the first time in years, I felt like a man with a purpose. The camp had taken enough. Now it was our turn. The morning broke cold, mist curling through the trees like breath from a dying man. I saddled the horse in silence, hands steady though my stomach twisted itself into knots. Abram checked his rifle, the metal glinting dull in the gray light. Ellie stood a few paces away, arms wrapped tight around herself, eyes fixed on the horizon where the hills rolled sharp and endless. We were leaving everything behind, the cabin, the graves, the fragile safety we'd carved out of blood and fire. But there was no turning back. Not now. Abram broke the silence first. Trails rough. We'll cut across the ridge, drop into the canyon by sundown. Camps deeper in, past the second bend. That's where their watch begins. Ellie didn't move, didn't blink. Her lips parted, her voice low. You're wrong. They've moved the watch posts. Closer now. 2 ridges in, not one. Abram stiffened. How would you know? Ellie finally turned to him. Her eyes were hollow, but there was a steel there that hadn't been before. Because I built them. The air between us snapped tight. Abram's jaw flexed. I kept my voice steady. Then you'll guide us. Every step. Ellie nodded once, then turned back to the hills. And just like that, she became more than just someone we were protecting. She was the key. The first stretch of road was silent but heavy. Birds scattered as we passed. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Every crunch of hoof on stone, every snap of twig felt like it could draw fire from unseen rifles. Abram rode ahead, scanning the tree line. I kept Ellie behind me, my eyes flicking back every few seconds, making sure she was still there. She sat stiff in the saddle, fingers clenched around the reins, eyes never leaving the trail. After hours of silence, she finally spoke. Do you know what they do when someone tries to leave? I glanced back at her. I can guess. No, her voice was sharp, urgent. You can't. They don't just kill you. They make everyone watch. And they make sure you're remembered. As an example. As a warning. Her words hung in the air like smoke. Abram grunted, but didn't speak. I could feel the weight of it pressing against both of us. Ellie's hands trembled on the reins. I still hear them. Every night. Screaming. I slowed my horse until we were side by side. Then we make sure they never scream again. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than fear in her eyes. I saw fire. By midday, the trail narrowed, twisting into jagged stone. The sun burned overhead, but the air stayed cold, shadows long and sharp. Abram raised a hand, signaling us to stop. Tracks, he muttered, crouching low. His fingers brushed the dirt. Riders. 4, maybe 5. Passed through less than an hour ago. My hand went to the shotgun. Scouts. Abram's face hardened. Or executioners. Ellie's breath hitched. She pointed down the ridge. There's a choke point ahead. If they're waiting, it'll be there. We pressed on, slow, cautious. Every step felt like stepping into a noose. When the gunfire came, it was sudden and merciless. The first shot shattered rock inches from Abram's head. Horses reared, Ellie screamed, and bullets tore the air apart. We dove for cover, rifles cracking from the ridge above. Ambush! Abram roared, rolling behind a boulder. His rifle barked back, sparks spitting from stone as lead tore the hillside. I dragged Ellie down with me, my body shielding hers as rounds slammed into the dirt. My ears rang, lungs burning with dust. Stay down, I shouted, pressing the shotgun into my shoulder. I fired blind, the blast echoing like thunder. One voice cut short in the rocks. Another shouted orders. They were trying to pin us, force us into the open. Abram crawled closer, face streaked with blood where a bullet had grazed him. We can't sit here. They'll circle us. Ellie's eyes were wild, darting, searching. Then suddenly she pointed, breath ragged. There. Behind the ridge. There's a hollow. We can flank them. Abram looked at me. I looked at her. There was no time to doubt. Move. I shouted. We scrambled across the rocks, bullets snapping at our heels. Dust filled my mouth, burned my throat. Ellie stumbled, nearly falling, but I caught her arm, dragging her forward. Abram's rifle cracked behind us, buying seconds with each shot. We dropped into the hollow, hearts pounding, sweat and blood mixing into one. From here, we could see them. 4 men crouched high on the ridge, rifles aimed where we'd been. They didn't see us. Not yet. I raised the shotgun. Abram leveled his rifle. Ellie froze, her breath coming fast. Her eyes locked on the men. Her hands shook, her whole body trembling. I was about to pull the trigger when I heard her voice. Low. Shaking. But full of rage. I know them. I glanced at her. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the gunmen like they were ghosts. They were guards, she whispered. They held me down. Her voice cracked, but her eyes burned hotter than I'd ever seen. She reached for the pistol at my belt with trembling fingers. Let me. I hesitated, then loosened my grip. Her hand closed around the weapon, knuckles white, chest heaving. She stood, just enough to clear the ridge, and before I could stop her, she fired. The shot rang out, clean and sharp. One man dropped, screaming, blood pouring from his leg. The others spun, caught off guard. Abram and I opened fire, tearing through the ridge. Men toppled, rifles clattering against the rocks. Silence followed, thick and brutal. Ellie lowered the pistol, her arm shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. Her chest rose and fell in ragged bursts. She looked at me, eyes wide, lips trembling. I did it, she whispered. God help me, I did it. I took the gun from her trembling hands, sliding it back into my belt. I wanted to tell her it was all right, that it had to be done. But the words stuck in my throat. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure if it was all right. Not for her. Not yet. By nightfall, we made camp in a dry creek bed. Abram cleaned his rifle, silent, lost in thought. I sat across the fire from Ellie, watching her stare into the flames. She hadn't spoken since the ridge. Finally she whispered, almost too soft to hear. Does it ever stop? The shaking? The faces? I didn't answer right away. I thought of all the men I'd killed. The blood on my hands that no fire could wash away. No, I said at last. But you learn to carry it. And sometimes it makes you stronger. She looked at me, tears glistening in the firelight. I don't want to be stronger. I just want to be free. Her voice cracked, and for a moment she looked more like the broken girl from my porch than the survivor who'd pulled a trigger hours ago. I reached across the fire, my hand closing over hers. Her fingers were cold, trembling. You will be, I said. I swear it. For the first time, she squeezed back. Weak, fragile but real. And in that moment, I knew, whatever hell waited in that camp, whatever blood would be spilled, we'd face it together. The next morning, Abram broke the silence. We're close now. 2 days, maybe less. Once we cross the canyon, there's no turning back. He looked at Ellie, then at me. His eyes were heavy, tired. You should both know something. I've been there before. That camp. Not as a lawman. Not as a rescuer. I helped build it. The words hit like a bullet. My fists clenched. What the hell are you saying? Abram's gaze didn't waver. I was younger. Thought I was cleaning up the territory. Thought we were putting criminals to work, making them useful. Didn't see what it really was until it was too late. By the time I did, I'd already signed my name in blood. Ellie's face went pale. You were one of them. Abram's voice cracked. I was blind. And I've been trying to atone ever since. Silence stretched long between us. My jaw ached from how tight I was clenching it. Finally, I said, then you know what we're walking into. Abram nodded, his eyes burning with the same fire I'd seen in Ellie's. Which is why I won't stop until it's ashes. That night, as the fire crackled low, I lay awake staring at the stars. Ellie slept fitful beside me, her face twisted in dreams. Abram sat watch, his silhouette rigid against the moonlight. I thought of the camp waiting ahead. Of the men who would kill us without a thought. Of Ellie's trembling hand around the pistol. Of Abram's confession. Of the graves we'd left behind. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to die. Because death meant something now. And tomorrow, we'd start writing the ending. The smell of smoke still clung to the cabin. It had been 3 days since the attack, 3 days since we'd fought them off with blood and fire. The walls were patched where bullets tore through, the floor scrubbed but still stained. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flash of gunfire, the faces of the men who came screaming through the dark. Ellie hadn't spoken a word since. She sat by the hearth, knees pulled to her chest, rocking slow like the motion might keep the nightmares away. Abram had tried to draw her out once or twice. Gentle words, a calm tone, but she only stared past him, eyes empty, lips sealed. I knew that look. I'd seen it in the war, when boys fresh from the fields watched their whole world burn in a single night. There's no talking someone out of it. You just stand guard, keep the fire lit, and pray time does what words can't. But time was running short. Abram slammed the door behind him, boots heavy on the floorboards. His face was set, jaw clenched. They're regrouping, he said. I rode as far as the ridge this morning. Tracks everywhere. They're gathering more men. I set down the knife I'd been sharpening. How many? He shook his head. Too many. The weight of it hung between us. Ellie's rocking slowed, her eyes flicking toward us. They won't stop, Abram went on. Not until they have her back. That banker's not just some greedy bastard, he's got backing. Money. Influence. Men willing to kill for him. You know what that means. I did. It meant the war we thought we'd left behind was walking up our valley road, and this time it wore the face of neighbors. I leaned back, feeling the years settle heavy in my bones. So what's your plan? Abram's gaze sharpened. We can't hold this place. Not against what's coming. We take her, we ride out tonight. Find a town with walls, with law that runs deeper than one badge. Somewhere they can't follow. No, I said. His eyes narrowed. No. I looked at Ellie. She was watching us, silent but listening, her small frame trembling in the firelight. She ran here, I said. To this place. To these hills. You think she wants to run again? You think there's anywhere on this earth they won't chase her? Abram's fists tightened. You're a fool. This isn't about what she wants. This is about survival. I rose slow, steady, meeting his glare head-on. Survival don't mean a damn thing if it costs her freedom. If we run, we're telling her she'll never be safe unless she hides behind someone else's walls. I won't do that. Not for her. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Finally, Abram cursed low and turned away, pacing by the door. You always were stubborn. I didn't answer. He wasn't wrong. That night, the air was thick with tension. Abram took the porch watch, muttering under his breath as he cleaned his rifle. I stayed inside, pretending to sleep, but my ears stayed open. Ellie lay curled under the blanket, her breathing shallow. Sometime near midnight, I heard her whisper, "Why me?" The words were cracked, thin as paper, but they were words. The first in days. I sat up slow, careful not to startle her. What do you mean? Her eyes glimmered in the firelight, wide and wet. Why do they want me back? Why won't they stop? I didn't know how much truth she could carry. Didn't know if the weight would crush her. But I couldn't lie either, not to someone who'd already seen hell. Because men like that, I said, voice low, they see people as things. Tools. They think they own you. And when something they think they own gets away, it makes them weak. They can't stand that. Her lip trembled. She pressed her face into the blanket. I don't want to be owned. I moved closer, slow, and laid a hand on the blanket near hers. Not touching, not crowding, just near enough. Then you won't be, I said. Not while I breathe. She stared at me for a long time. Then, almost too quiet to hear, she whispered, "Promise. Promise." The next morning, Abram was gone. His horse tracks led down the ridge road, fresh in the dew. No note, no word. Just gone. I didn't blame him. He'd made his choice. He always had one foot out the door, chasing order in a lawless land. Me, I was rooted. Too damn old, too damn tired to run again. But Ellie, when she woke and saw his rifle missing from the wall, she didn't speak. Didn't cry. Just folded into herself, shoulders shaking in silence. It cut me deeper than any bullet ever had. That evening, I went to the barn to check the traps. The sun was low, throwing the hills into long shadows. That's when I saw him. The banker. Not on a horse, not with a gang. Just him, standing at the tree line, hands clasped behind his back like a preacher about to give sermon. My shotgun was in my hands before I knew it. Step closer, and you're a dead man. He smiled. Always that damn smile. I don't doubt it, he said. But I came to talk. There's nothing you can say I want to hear. He tilted his head. Oh, I think there is. Because you're a practical man. You've seen war. You know how it works. One girl's not worth dying for. Not when the ground is already soaked with blood. I took a step forward, raising the barrel. She's worth every drop. He chuckled, low and cold. You don't even know what she is, do you? You think she's just some runaway? Some poor child who stumbled into your yard. Something in his voice made my grip tighten. What are you talking about? He spread his hands, calm as the devil himself. Ask her. If she'll tell you. Or wait, and watch as the truth burns this little sanctuary to the ground. And just like that, he turned and vanished into the trees. No rush, no fear. Like he knew the war was already won. That night, I sat by the fire, shotgun across my knees. Ellie was asleep, or pretending to be, her face half buried in the blanket. I kept hearing his words. You don't even know what she is. And for the first time, doubt gnawed at me. Not about protecting her. That promise was carved into my bones. But about the storm that was coming. Because storms don't break for promises. They break promises apart. The nights grew longer. Out here in the mountains, the dark pressed close, thick and heavy, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Each creak of the cabin walls, each whisper of wind through the pines, set my nerves on edge. Sleep came in snatches, shallow and restless. Ellie hardly slept at all. I'd wake to the sound of her moving, padding across the floor like a ghost. Sometimes she'd stand at the window, staring out at the tree line. Other times she'd sit by the cold hearth, arms wrapped tight around her knees, whispering words I couldn't hear. And always, I remembered what the banker had said. You don't even know what she is. It was poison in my mind. A thought that wouldn't shake loose. On the fourth night after Abram's leaving, the sound of hoofbeats woke me. Slow. Heavy. I reached for the shotgun before my eyes were even open, heart pounding against my ribs. The door swung wide. Abram stood there. His face was drawn, beard ragged from days on the trail. But his eyes, those sharp, steady eyes I'd known half my life, burned with something new. Something hard. Ellie scrambled back against the wall, clutching her blanket like a shield. She didn't speak. Abram closed the door behind him, set his rifle against the wall, and let the silence stretch. Finally, I said, "Didn't think you'd be back." He shrugged, the motion stiff. "Didn't think I would either." I narrowed my eyes. "So what changed?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he dropped into the chair by the fire, rubbing his temples like a man carrying too many miles on his back. Then he looked up. "They're not just bounty hunters," he said. "Not just hired guns. I rode into Redwater, talked to a man I trust. The ones after her, they're tied to something bigger. A network. Smuggling, land grabs, politics. And the banker. He ain't just a banker. He's a front. A name they use to make their dealings look clean." The air in the room seemed to tighten. Ellie's breathing quickened. She pulled the blanket tighter, her eyes darting between us. I leaned forward. And her? Where does she fit in all this? Abram's gaze flicked to Ellie, then back to me. He lowered his voice. "She's not just a runaway. She's the key. To what, I don't know. But whatever she saw, whatever she knows, they'll burn this whole valley to ash before they let her go." Ellie shook her head, whispering, No, that's not true." Her voice cracked, small and desperate. I turned to her. "Ellie, tell me." Her lips trembled. Her eyes shone with terror. But beneath it, I saw something else. Guilt. She drew in a shuddering breath. I didn't mean to. I wasn't supposed to hear. I was just bringing water, like always. But the door was open and they didn't see me. I heard them talking. Her voice dropped lower, each word a weight. They killed him. The judge. Everyone thought he died in an accident, but it was them. They paid for it. They laughed about it. Said no one would ever know. But I saw. I heard everything. My stomach turned cold. The judge. A name I hadn't spoken in years, but one that carried weight. He was one of the few men who'd tried to bring law where none wanted it. A man who stood against corruption when most bent to it. And if they'd killed him, I understood now. Ellie wasn't just a runaway. She was a witness. A living knife aimed at the heart of powerful men. Abram's jaw was set tight. That's why they want her back. Not because of who she is. Because of what she knows. Ellie's hands shook so hard she nearly dropped the blanket. I didn't want to. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to leave. I didn't. I moved to her, crouching low so she could see my face. Listen to me. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you hear me? Tears streaked her cheeks. She nodded, barely. But Abram wasn't done. We can't protect her alone. You know that. They'll send more men, better armed. This isn't a fight we can win with a cabin and a shotgun. I straightened, meeting his stare. So what's your plan? Drag her into town? Put her in the hands of men who might already be bought. His lips thinned. Not every lawman's corrupt. No, I said. But enough are. You put her out there, and they'll find her before the ink dries on the paperwork. Abram slammed his fist against the table. Then what? You want to hole up here until they burn the place down? Until they put a bullet in you and drag her off screaming? The fire popped between us, spitting sparks into the silence. Ellie's voice broke it. Soft. Fragile. I don't want anyone else to die because of me. We both turned. She was staring into the flames, face pale, eyes hollow. Abram's anger dimmed. My own chest ached. You listen to me, girl, I said, firm but gentle. Their sins ain't yours to carry. They kill because that's what they are. Wolves. You're the proof that wolves can be beaten. That's why they fear you. Her lip trembled. But in her eyes, for the first time in days, I saw something stir. Not hope. Not yet. But the spark of it. That night, after she slept, Abram and I sat on the porch. The air was cold, stars burning sharp overhead. She won't survive this if we keep treating her like glass, Abram said quietly. You know that. I sipped my coffee, letting the bitterness sit on my tongue. She's a child. She's more than that now, he said. Whether she likes it or not. I didn't answer. I didn't want to admit he was right. The sound of an owl echoed through the trees. Farther off, I thought I heard something else. A faint metallic clink. Chains. Abram heard it too. His hand went to his rifle. We stood in silence, listening. But the sound faded. For now. Morning brought smoke. Not ours. From the ridge, I could see it rising in black pillars, far off but moving closer. Villages. Farms. Burned in their path. They're clearing the valley, Abram muttered, jaw tight. Scorched earth. Anyone who might give her shelter. My fists clenched. Monsters. He didn't argue. Ellie came up beside me, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. She followed our gaze, saw the smoke, and her face went white. They're coming, she whispered. And for once, neither of us had the heart to deny it. That night, as the cabin settled into uneasy silence, I sat awake, shotgun across my knees. And I realized something. This wasn't just about protecting Ellie anymore. It was about striking back. If we kept running, they'd never stop. If we kept hiding, they'd burn the whole world around us. No. The only way this ended was to take the fight to them. And the thought that chilled me most of all. I was ready. The valley was no longer quiet. For weeks, its rivers had carried nothing but snowmelt, its winds nothing but the sigh of pine. Now they carried the smell of burning homes. The cries of the displaced. The rumble of boots and hooves as strangers claimed land that wasn't theirs. And all of it, every fire, every scream, was because of the girl sleeping in our cabin. Ellie. Abram spread a rough-drawn map across the table. Candlelight flickered over it, throwing shadows that made the lines seem to writhe like snakes. They've split into 3 groups, he muttered, stabbing at the parchment with a calloused finger. One here, cutting off the North Pass. Another here, sweeping the settlements. And the last, he tapped the spot closest to us. Is hunting. Searching cabin to cabin. I leaned over the map, jaw tight. And how long before the hunters find us? 2, maybe 3 days. Ellie sat curled in the corner, listening but not speaking. Her eyes were glassy, fixed on the flames. Abram noticed. His voice softened. If we leave now, we can slip past the net. Get her to the rail line. Once she's out of the valley. No, Ellie whispered. Abram blinked. What? She raised her head, and for the first time since she'd come into our lives, there was no fear in her face, only resolve. If I run, they'll keep burning, keep killing, because of me. It won't stop until I stop them. Her voice trembled, but the words held. Abram swore under his breath. You're a child. You think you can fight men like them? She looked straight at him. I don't think. I know I have to. I should have spoken. Should have told her she was wrong. But the truth sat heavy in my gut. She was right. Running had bought us time, nothing more. If we kept fleeing, the valley would become a graveyard. And even if Ellie survived, she'd carry the weight of every life lost in her name. I looked at Abram. He read the answer in my eyes before I spoke it. No, he said flatly. Don't you start with this madness too. I straightened, voice low. You said it yourself, this isn't a fight we can win by hiding. So maybe we stop hiding. His hands curled into fists. You've lost your damn mind. Maybe, I said. But at least I haven't lost my soul. The words cut sharper than I intended. Abram flinched like I'd struck him. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the table, the map between us like a line drawn in blood. Then he turned away. That night, I found Ellie sitting on the porch, watching the stars. Her blanket draped around her shoulders, hair glinting silver in the moonlight. Can't sleep? I asked. She shook her head. I sat beside her, the boards creaking under our weight. For a while we just sat there, listening to the night. Finally, she spoke. When I first ran, I thought I just wanted to be free. I didn't care where I went, as long as it wasn't there. But now, it's not about me anymore, is it? No, I said softly. It's not. She hugged her knees tighter. Do you think I'm brave? I smiled faintly. Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about standing up even when you are. And if that's true, then yes. You're braver than anyone I've ever known. Her eyes shone. Not with tears this time, but with something steadier. Then I'll stand, she whispered. At dawn, we prepared. The cabin was small, but it had strengths. Thick timber walls, narrow windows, a view of the slope below. We cut firing slits, stacked firewood into barricades, laid traps where the undergrowth grew thick. Ellie helped. She hauled wood, hammered nails, fetched water. She did it without complaint, though her hands blistered and her arms trembled. Abram watched her with a scowl, but I caught something else in his eyes, too. Not anger. Not contempt. Something closer to fear. As the sun dipped, we stood on the ridge together. Smoke still rose on the horizon, but now it felt closer. The enemy moved like a storm, swallowing everything in its path. They'll come soon, Abram muttered. And we'll be ready, I said. His jaw tightened. If we stand and fight, we die. Then we die fighting, I said. He turned to me, eyes burning. You'd throw your life away for her? I didn't flinch. Not for her. For what's right. He stared at me a long time. Then he looked away, shoulders sagging. You sound like him, he said quietly. Who? The judge. The name hung in the air like a ghost. That night, Ellie found me carving by the fire. A habit of mine, shaving wood into rough figures. What's that? She asked. I held it up. A hawk, wings half spread. Crude, but recognizable. For you, I said. Her eyes widened. Why? Because hawks don't run from storms. They rise above them. She took the carving in her small hands, staring at it like it was something sacred. Then she whispered, Thank you. The next morning, Abram was gone. His rifle, his bedroll, his horse, gone. Ellie found the note first. 3 words, scrawled in his rough hand. Forgive me. Survive. She looked at me, panic rising. He left us. I folded the note, slipped it into my pocket. My heart ached, but I forced my voice steady. Then we'll stand without him. By evening, I saw the first riders on the ridge. Dark figures against the blood-red sky. The storm had come. And there was no turning back. The first shot came at dusk. A crack split the silence, and the cabin wall shuddered as lead buried itself in the timber. Ellie flinched, but I pulled her down. "They've found us," I whispered. Outside, voices rose. Harsh, guttural. Laughter, shouts, the metallic scrape of rifles being loaded. Shadows moved between the trees. The hunt was over. The siege had begun. We had prepared as best we could, but no plan survives the first bullet. The walls shook with each shot, dust sifting from the beams. The air filled with gunpowder and fear. Ellie crouched in the corner, clutching the hawk carving I'd given her. Her knuckles were white. "Stay low," I told her. "Don't move unless I say." She nodded, lips pressed tight. I slid into position by the firing slit and returned fire. The rifle bucked in my hands. A figure staggered in the tree-line, fell. Another darted forward, only to be cut down by one of the traps we'd set. The scream was short, swallowed by the forest. But for every man who fell, 2 more seemed to appear. The hours dragged like years. Shots tore through the shutters. Glass shattered. Smoke thickened in the air. And then, silence. The gunfire stopped. The voices hushed. Only the crackle of the fire in the hearth remained. I didn't like it. "Why did they stop?" Ellie whispered. I shook my head. "Because they're not done yet." The first torch arced through the window. It landed in the corner, flames licking at the floorboards. "Fire!" I shouted, kicking it aside. Another torch followed. Then, another. Within moments, the cabin was an inferno. Out the back. I grabbed Ellie's arm, dragging her toward the trapdoor. We had dug it days ago, a narrow crawlspace that led to the slope behind the cabin. Smoke stung our eyes, heat seared our skin, but we forced our way through. We spilled out into the night, coughing, gasping. The forest loomed dark around us. Behind us, the cabin roared as flames devoured it. "They'll be waiting," Ellie choked out. "I know," I said. And they were. Shadows moved between the trees, circling. Torches flared, hemming us in. A figure stepped forward. Tall, broad-shouldered, face hidden beneath a black hat. His voice was cold as iron. "Enough running, girl." Ellie froze, breath sharp. I stepped in front of her, rifle raised. "You'll have to go through me." The man tilted his head, amused. "So be it." The fight was chaos. Gunfire lit the night. Shouts echoed through the trees. I fired, reloaded, fired again, every shot a prayer. Men fell, but still they came. One rushed me with a knife. I barely blocked the strike, the blade grazing my arm. Pain flared hot. I slammed the rifle but into his jaw, dropped him where he stood. Another tried to drag Ellie away. She screamed, biting, clawing, fighting with a fury that shocked even me. The man cursed, but before he could strike her, I put a bullet through his chest. Blood sprayed the leaves. And then, I was out of bullets. The black-hatted leader stepped forward, calm amid the storm. His revolver gleamed in the torchlight. "You fought well," he said. "But this ends now." Ellie clutched my arm, trembling. I stood tall, empty rifle in my hands. "You'll never take her." His smile was cruel. "She isn't yours to keep." He raised the revolver. And then an echo split the night. A gunshot. Not his. The leader staggered, shock flashing across his face. A crimson bloom spread across his chest. Behind him, in the tree-line, a familiar voice roared. "Not while I still draw breath. Abram." He crashed into the clearing like a storm, rifle blazing. Each shot was fury given form, each step a vow kept. Men fell before him, torches dropping, screams rising. Ellie's eyes widened. He came back. Relief surged through me, sharp and blinding. "Stay behind me." I shouted, grabbing her hand. Together we pushed toward Abram as the enemy faltered, broken by his sudden fury. But the leader wasn't finished. Wounded, staggering, he raised his revolver one last time. The shot rang out. I turned. Ellie screamed. And Abram fell. The world seemed to stop. He dropped to his knees, blood darkening his shirt. His rifle slipped from his grasp, landing in the dirt. No! I shouted, rushing to him. Ellie was right behind me, sobbing. Abram's eyes found mine. They were still fierce, but softer now, too. Don't waste this, he rasped. I shook my head, choking. Stay with me. We'll get you out. Don't lie. He coughed blood, smiled faintly. You were right. Hiding never saved anyone. His gaze shifted to Ellie. Stand, girl, he whispered. Stand, and make them remember. And with that, his eyes dimmed. The firelight flickered, and Abram was gone. Something broke in Ellie then. The sobbing stopped. The trembling ceased. She rose slowly to her feet, face streaked with ash and tears, but her eyes burned with a fury I had never seen. She picked up Abram's rifle. Her small hands gripped it tight. The leader, barely standing, sneered through his blood. You think a child can kill me? Ellie stepped forward, voice like iron. I don't think. I know. The shot echoed like thunder. And the black-hatted man fell. Silence followed. The surviving men fled into the night, broken, leaderless. The torches guttered out. Only the burning cabin remained, crackling behind us. Ellie lowered the rifle, breathing hard. I laid a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. She looked up at me, eyes still blazing. It's not over, is it? I shook my head. No. This was only the beginning. The night after the battle, Ellie stood among the ashes of the cabin, rifle in hand, smoke curling around her. The fire had claimed everything, yet it felt like a cleansing. I watched her, understanding dawning. She was no longer the frightened girl who had stumbled into my life. She whispered to the wind, words lost in the smoke, and for the first time, I realized she wasn't asking for protection anymore. She was preparing to take the fight to them. The valley had burned, homes lost, lives shattered, but she wouldn't let their terror end here. I handed her a small bundle of supplies, my hands steady despite the ache in my chest. This is only the beginning, I said. Ellie nodded, eyes hard and resolute. Then let's finish it. We set out under the cover of darkness, moving through the hills and valleys, tracking the remnants of the men who had terrorized her life. Each step was heavy with the past, but also with purpose. Every shadow could hide danger, every sound could herald death, but she moved forward, unflinching. And as she led, I realized that maybe, just maybe, her courage could teach me something I had forgotten. About standing, about fighting, and about hope. Dawn broke over the valley, painting the hills in gold and blood-red shadows. Ellie moved silently, scanning the ridges, her rifle ready. Every step she took was deliberate, each breath controlled. She was hunting now, not fleeing. We came upon a small camp, the men who had tormented her for so long. They were fewer in number, drunk on fear and overconfidence. Ellie didn't hesitate. She took the lead, creeping closer, eyes cold, voice steady only in her head. One shot rang out, a warning. Then, another. And then she was among them, moving like the storm itself, precise, unrelenting. Chaos erupted. Screams filled the air, shadows scattered, but Ellie was a force beyond them, a reckoning made flesh. I followed behind, covering her back. The valley had claimed its scars, but tonight, justice was in our hands. Each man who had sought to enslave or destroy her fell, and with every strike, Ellie grew stronger, more certain. By nightfall, the camp was empty, the terror ended. Ellie stood alone among the remnants, smoke from burning tents rising around her. She looked at me, exhausted, yet triumphant. It's done, she said, voice quiet but fierce. I nodded. For the first time in years, the valley felt like it could breathe again. The valley was silent. No hooves, no shouts, no cries, only the wind through the pines and the distant glow of a rising sun. Ellie stood at the edge of the ridge, rifle slung over her shoulder, her hands stained with the past but steady. The nightmare that had followed her for so long had ended, and yet, something deeper had awakened inside her. She turned to me, eyes fierce but softened by relief. "We survived," she said. "Not as a girl, not as a victim, but as a force of her own making." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. All those years of solitude, regrets older than the hills themselves, had led to this moment. Protecting her had saved me as much as I had saved her. The first rays of sunlight touched the valley, and for the first time, it felt like home. The trees whispered, the wind carried a promise. A promise that no evil could ever claim this land, or the hearts of those who refused to bow. Ellie finally smiled, a small, real smile, and for the first time, I saw her free. Not just from them, but from the shadow of fear itself. We walked down the ridge together, side by side, knowing that scars remain, but courage and hope endures. And out here in the West, the story doesn't end. It simply rides on, carried by those who stand, who fight, and who refuse to walk away.